Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're viewing from. This is Laura Thompson with TAN TV, the African American Network, where we have a local feel with a global reach, and it's Women's History Month. And so we have the distinct privilege and pleasure of introducing a very dear person that's near and dear to my heart, Miss Shaniqua Staples. How you doing, Shaniqua? Happy Women's History Month.
Happy Women's History Month. I'm doing good, Miss Laura, and I'm glad that I'm near and dear to your heart because you are too. So appreciate it.
So y'all like her smile, right? She's got this contagious smile,
My Kool-Aid
and
smile.
right, and you can't turn it down. When I first met Shaniqua, I don't know how she got my number, and it's okay that she did because we've been friends and connected for several years now. But she called me and she wanted me to interview her and
Mhm.
another lady. And she just kept calling. She's like, "Are you going to call me or not?" So I said, "Let me find out what this lady." No, she put urgent on there, and I
Yeah.
said, "Oh my God, I wonder what happened." So I connected with her, and she was having this great event called the Melanin Women's Movement,
Yes.
and so that's near and dear to my heart too. Community and doing things for African American women or women in general, and so I said, okay, let's do it. So they took me out to eat at
You
a
sure did.
restaurant, and we talked about it. But one thing about her, she's very organized, and she knows what she wants, and she wants to meet about it and talk about it and strategize it and let you know what her plan is. And so, thank you for stopping by, Shaniqua, and thank you for pulling my coattail years ago. It was well worth it. Um, but before we get started with the interview, I'd just like to get a little biographical information about you, like, where you're from, what you do, why you do it, and all
Yeah.
that stuff.
Yeah, no problem. Yes, I remember it was, I think my son wasn't even one yet. So it was in 2018, I know for sure. Yeah, he wasn't even one yet. I
What?
remember that because I was in your inbox. I was DMing you all the time.
Yeah, I'm like, who is this lady? Oh my God.
Oh my goodness, that's hilarious. Well, a little background about me. So my name is Shaniqua Staples. I was born and raised in Pontiac, Michigan. So I've been in San Antonio since 2014. But like I said, born and raised in Pontiac, Michigan. And I guess my background and I'm going to go like kind of backwards. So what brought me to San Antonio was two things. One, I knew that I wanted to leave Michigan. I'm not a fan of cold weather,
Yeah.
and it was one of those things where at that time I was working for a healthcare agency in Michigan, and I just wanted something different. Like I'm always big about change. Where else can I grow? And they had openings in Texas, so I was just like, okay, let me see which one will let me transfer. And I was actually supposed to be in Dallas. So I was like, okay, cool. I was preparing to go to Dallas, getting everything together. And last minute, it was like, oh, we have an opening in San Antonio. And I was
Wow.
like, okay, here I'll go. So that's kind of how it worked out. So it was like no plans to be here in San Antonio. But I will say it was like one of the best decisions that I've made. From there, I kind of finished my master's in San Antonio. So I have a master's in social work. I'm a therapist. And what I specialize in is crisis management and postpartum depression for women of color. So I was able to kind of complete all those tasks here while I was in San Antonio. And from there, I kind of just continued to like grow professionally. I think the biggest thing that San Antonio also provided me was a place to kind of find my identity. And when you talk about the Melanin Movers movement, it allowed me to kind of connect with other women who were also trying to find that identity. Because one of the things I noticed about San Antonio, it's a lot of transplants here, right? There's a lot of people who are either military or just like me, just happened to end up here and kind of stayed.
Wow.
So I was really big on finding my own community back then. So like I was like, let me do something that can also help other women find their community. So I'm also big on community. And another thing with going back to where I was from Pontiac, Michigan, my grandmother raised me. So I was raised by my grandmother. And I'm really a true example of there takes a village to raise a child. I am an 80s baby. So, we went through a lot of the trials and tribulations of the 80s. We had the crack epidemic, we had the projects, things like that. So, trying to navigate, all these different things at a kid was pretty difficult. But I will say that my grandmother did the best she could for me and my sisters to just make sure that we had like some type of support system. But even with the midst of that, I've always been someone who was a little bit different. I always kind of kept to myself, but I love books. Like I love literature. I remember I was like in middle school already reading like Alice Walker, reading Color Purple, but
Wow.
before the movies were even like really a big thing, Roots. I've always loved books that kind of talked more about my culture. But, also being a kid, I love my Babysitter Club books. I love Madeline, So
Mhm.
I was someone who, because I was just so sheltered and kind of kept to myself, I found myself, just loving the world of literature, loving the world of books. And it also kept me out of trouble. But
Yeah.
one of the things that kind of also grounded me when I was growing up in Michigan was, and I talk about this a lot in the podcast that we have on TAN TV, is just being able
Right.
to have that tribe and that community. And I think the biggest thing for me is I've always been a go-getter, always knew what I wanted, despite whatever circumstances I may grew up in. So I was one who was already trying to figure out, like, okay, how can I get out of my circumstances? How can I kind of pull myself up and, get out of what people think are like statistic? Because I was a teen mom. I had my oldest at 16. So I've always been one to say, you know what, just because a situation happens doesn't mean I have to be that stigma. A lot of times people already try to put labels on us as, African American women. And when we come from certain parts of society, they already kind of write us off. So I was big into like figuring out, okay, how can I go to college? How can I make sure I still graduate with honors? And just making sure that I continue to do the dang thing, because as women, that's what we have to do. And I never made excuses for myself. I think one of the things that always kind of kept me grounded was knowing that at the end of the day, the world is my oyster and I can be whatever I want to be. And I
Mhm.
think that was really powerful for me growing up, because you didn't always see that, right? You didn't always see people who were able to kind of like pull themselves out of certain situations. But I always try to be optimistic. And I think that's one of the reasons why I smile so much, because I always feel like there's so much more to be grateful for versus, to keep yourself down. And I think growing up, because I had so many situations that kind of kept me down, I realized that one, my kids were looking at me, right? They were looking at me. I was their role model and I wanted to show them something different. And then two, life just became so precious to me because I know that I had people in my life, family, who make sacrifices, and I wanted to make them proud. I never want to make any sacrifices anyone made for me and kind of go in vain. I wanted to say like, hey, thank you for being there. Thank you for raising me when you didn't have to. I was really big into church. So just everybody just kind of like, I feel like everybody just kind of like put their arms around me and kind of created who I am today. So from there, like I said, I went to college.
Right.
I
Let's
actually,
let's 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 not tell.
oh, I didn't know you want me
Yeah.
to
No, that's okay. That's okay. So you were a teen mom. Your grandmother raised you. You ended up, moving to San Antonio and get a master's degree,
Yes.
uh, which, and I've seen you move. You get a job and just go.
Yes.
But you've elevated yourself. But so, and when you with your grandmother raising you, what inspired you to go to school, to go to college, or to further your education?
Yeah, so I think what inspired me with my grandmother raising me is she really installed in me that I could be anything I want to be. Like I said, because I was so sheltered, I was bullied a lot. So like I've always was really down on myself, but she just always motivated me to like do what you want to do. You can be whatever you want to be. Again, the world is your oyster type of thing. So I never saw any barriers that could keep me from going to college, even though I may not have experienced a lot of people in my life who had went to college. My grandmother didn't go to college, but I did have aunts and things that did go to college. So it was like I had like bits and pieces of everything. It's like, I can choose this route or I can choose that route. And I think because of the mindset of, I can do anything I want to do, I always chose the route less like taken, just knowing that hey, I can do these things.
It's crazy because you go after the big fish and you get it. So what was it like? You said you were a teen mom. So what was it like raising uh, your son, and how did you juggle all of the other things that you were into?
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, it wasn't easy. I did not. because I kept to myself, and me and my son's father are really good friends. And I will say that it was not easy because I wasn't ready to have a baby. I think I always have the signs of like I'm not ready during that whole pregnancy. Like I remember when I had my son and they handed me the baby, I cried, you
Oh,
know, and I think this is why I was really big in like postpartum depression for women of color, because like no one asked me what's wrong or like she needed to talk to someone. They just left, which is
right.
always crazy. So here I'm in with a baby and I'm crying because I realized like, hey, we're about to grow up together. My life is not stable. So how can I take care of you when, the people who are taking care of me are barely making it? So it was really tough. But I will say what was that silver lining for me was the fact that I had his father, was the fact that his father's family. Because I will say my son's grandmother, she really made it a point that me and her son, who was his father, were going to graduate high school. She was really instrumental in just making sure that we had the support for our son. And I think from there, in terms of juggling, it wasn't easy. I did end up getting emancipated also. So I did legally divorce my parents so that I could get the resources I needed in order to take care of me and my son. One of the big things that unfortunately is not really available now, but back then in the early 2000s, there were a lot of resources for you to raise your child. Like they did pay for childcare, they would give you food assistance, housing assistance, but because of my situation, I was not able to obtain those things on my own. So I already knew, like you said, I'm really organized. I knew at an early age, like, hey, I need to do this one, two, and three in order to get what I need to properly raise my son. So I was able to go to a judge, get emancipated. They legally granted myself my own guardianship. And from there, I just started filling out scholarships, things like that, so that I could get a free ride in college. But it wasn't easy. I didn't have much of a social life. I was really, really focused on making sure that my son had a different life than myself. But I think the downfall there is I worked a lot. I never just decided to like miss a beat. So I was working multiple jobs. I was going to college. I was raising him, working days and nights and having the afternoon with him. So I try not to think about it now because I don't know. It was God that literally helped me get through that because I was juggling a lot.
Wow, that's phenomenal. So fast forward to here, but I want to tell y'all this that you probably didn't know before I ask the next question. So if you listen to the name Shaniqua Staples, if you're old enough, or if you were in a household with someone that was old enough, you would maybe think of Mavis Staple or the Staple Singers,
Mhm.
and so she is related to the Staples because there's not very many people with that name. She's also related to what some of the singers from the Mighty Clouds of
Mhm.
Joy.
Ron Staples, yeah.
Yeah, Ron.
Yeah. I will say it's funny you said that. My staple side of my family, which is my grandfather, really, really rich in history. I think that's one of the only sides I know that I can really track down all our roots, which is awesome.
Mm,
And my grandfather was also a pastor. My uncles are pastors. So like when I say like it's really, really rooted in the gospel on that side, it's really rooted. So yeah, I am related to the Staple Singers. We do have multiple family members who are pastors and then also who are gospel singers. But again, I think that also ties things to why my faith is the way it is because that's how I grew up. Even with my grandfather, he played a role in raising me and helping be there for my grandmother with me. So like I've always been in church. I've always been around just God and knowing that, hey, He is the one who, takes care of me. He is the one who is going to be there. And one thing I will give my grandparents is they planted that seed early on. And I always
mm,
tell people, once that seed is planted, it never goes away.
right.
No matter how hard life gets, it's just being water. It's being water. And trust me, when that plant needs to grow, it's going to grow. So yes, definitely deeply rooted in the staple side, deeply rooted in my Christian background.
Wow. And so the other thing that people might not know about you, some people do. I know a little bit about that you dabbled in it, but I don't really know much. But you do some acting uh,
Yes.
also. So before I met you, you had leading roles in plays. You've written your own
Mhm.
documentary. You've done a lot of things. So what inspired you to do that?
Yeah, I think this has to do with that shy side of me. I realized early on, I think it was in college, I was doing improv classes, and people always get surprised, like, Shaniqua doesn't talk, but like, get her on the stage, she's going to be whatever character. And what I realized is the ability to be someone else helped me unleash things that I didn't feel comfortable unleashing in my regular self. And I think it was a confidence thing, right? I think when I'm on stage, it's this different type of confidence because I know the role is to be silly, or I know the role is to be serious, and I can relate to that identity. But because I grew up with so little confidence, I didn't have an identity to relate to. So I
Mm,
think I always struggled with that. But I first started doing plays in churches. Like I said, because I was so deeply rooted in my church community, one of the things that I loved was being able to work with the youth. So, I had two different churches that I belonged to who allowed me to kind of dabble in that. I did a Christmas play for my church, Prospect and Pontiac. And then I was part of a different church, Greater Love, where I was able to put on my own type of play. And yeah, I love to write plays. Shout out to my friends who let me drag them into my plays. But that's when I really felt like, oh, I really, really enjoy this. I also had a role in Michigan with Mice and Men. So I did a lot of smaller roles in plays. But as time went on, I realized that I like acting. So let me kind of dabble into more of the film. So I did live in California briefly. And during my time in California, I did do extra work for some movies on Tubi and then for Churchy with Kevin on Stage. So that was a pretty awesome experience to kind of really be with the cast. And of course, my character was a church member. So,
wow.
it wasn't too far to kind of get
You're
away from
natural
it.
with
Yeah,
that, huh?
exactly. It was natural. But from there, what I've learned too, and I started doing this probably when I moved to California, is when my grandmother, because she did pass away, but before she passed away, and I moved back to Michigan for a little bit, I realized that I didn't know so much about her. I knew who she was. I knew she took care of us no matter what, but I didn't feel like I knew her story. So what started me to start doing documentaries was I wanted to know her story. So I started a series called Stories with My Elders. And what I did, I sat down with my grandmother and I just asked her questions. I just asked her questions about, how did you get to Michigan from Arkansas? Or like, how did you forgive people who hurt you? Or, how do you feel about this marriage? Or how do you feel about your kids? And I always tell people, if you have the time, please have these stories with your elders. Like they want to talk, they want to share. It's crazy how our generation don't really have these conversations. I feel like we're so focused on us that sometimes we forget like the people who raised us. So to have that great conversation with my grandmother, who's an amazing woman, it just kind of had me look into other conversations. So I did a story with my grandfather. I was able to do one with my uncle, and I have a couple other family members that I'm still working on. So I'm planning on getting all these stories together to really just release the stories with my elders. And then I'm also working with a production company in Austin to do a conversation called Concrete Rose. So basically, the rise,
Wow.
fall, and rise of my hometown of Pontiac, Michigan. So though I started off in front of the camera, I realized that I love storytelling and I love being able to just bring these stories out behind the camera and just love to hear other people's experiences.
Wow. So isn't she phenomenal? Isn't she phenomenal? So you dabble in acting and you writing and producing and directing, and that all speaks to your ability to be organized and planned. Because I know I've listened to you talk about these projects,
Mm-hmm.
um, and you don't take things lightly and you don't rush into it. Like whereas for me, I'll say, oh, I'm gonna interview 31 women in March,
Uh-huh.
and then just start doing it.
Which is
But
amazing.
but you plan it out, and I think that's amazing. Because I don't really have that skill. So you do the acting. So but by profession, in terms of which you obtains your degree in, you are a social worker, a licensed social worker.
Yes, yes.
So,
I always tell people my career journey is really interesting,
mhm.
because I went to school originally to be a librarian because, like I said, I love
A
literature.
librarian, really?
Yeah, so I have an associate's in library science, and then I was a library technician for a while in Michigan. And the reason why I went from that to social work was I actually had a meeting with a social worker, and this was during my time in my associates, and she was like, I think you would be good as a social worker. And at that time, I didn't know what a social worker was. Like, I knew I had a
Mhm.
social worker due to all the programs I was in when I was a teenager, but I didn't think I would be a good social worker. So I remember it was Professor Gail, and she just like really showed me a different side of like what I could be. And
Mhm.
like I said, I had a social worker who was working with me, and I told her like, I want to be like you, and she was like, please don't. Like, there's no money here, you know. Like, don't do this. Like, be a health inspector because that's the route we were going. And I was like, no, I really like helping people. So I ended up getting my associates also in social work, and then mental health. I was a mental health technician. That's where I got it in. And then my bachelor's BSW in social work with a minor in psychology. So from there, I was really on this road or this path to just do social work and make sure that I'm helping other people. And from there, it kind of pivoted. So as you know, I'm a social worker, and I kind of pivoted to crisis management. From crisis management, I ended up. Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. Because I was going to ask you about the you have a
Yes.
knack for finding these high tech jobs, but so you turned your camera off though.
Oh, sorry, Miss Laura. I was trying to get EJ together. Can I grab something for him 1 second?
Yeah, I'll try to put on a couple of commercial breaks. But
Okay.
before you go, this guy said happy extremist. He said happy extremist feminism day. And he said, do you gather underground or something and discuss radical feminism? We might. You never know. But we're gonna take a station break, and we'll be right back. So thank you for tuning in and to it's Women's History Month, and we are live talking about the journey of Shaniqua Staples. Yes, she is related to the famous Staples singers, but while she's gone, we're gonna play a few clips to so you can see some other things that are happening in San Antonio.
Get ready for a showdown with the HBCU All-Stars, the best in black college basketball.
Hello, my name is Travis Williams. I'm the CEO and founder of HBCU All-Stars, a black-owned sports marketing events and media company located in Atlanta, Georgia.
Epic doubleheader featuring the 4th annual men's HBCU All-Star Game and first ever women's HBCU All-Star Game during Final Four weekend in the great city of San Antonio at Freeman Coliseum on Sunday, April 6th, celebrating the best in black college and showing the world HBCUs matter.
Okay.
So she's quick too. She's back. She's
Yeah.
back.
Sorry, mommy name was called. Thank you so much.
So we were talking about your social work journey, and so you've done social work. You've done an organization that
Yes.
supports women. Um,
Yeah.
as
Um, so I had an organization that kind of also brought me to the Melanin Movers movement that I was doing with Shalonda and a couple other ladies. So when I got to San Antonio, I was still doing social work. I was a traveling social worker. But I was dealing a lot more with helping people kind of understand their benefits, especially people who are on Medicaid, like making sure they were able to get all the resources that they needed. And that kind of
Mhm.
made me think about two things. One, my experience when I had my son, like I told you about the postpartum story, right? Like, hey, I'm a young black woman here. I'm crying with this baby. No one's helping me. That always stuck with me. And when I decided to do Rebirth Her, my primary goal was to help women find a voice and understand how to advocate for themselves. I realized that that is hard for women to do. It is extremely hard for Black women to do when it comes to the medical field. Just because there's so many stereotypes, there's so many stigmas on us that it's really hard to feel safe to say, hey, I'm in pain, or hey, I need help. Because 9 times out of 10, we already feel like the doctors aren't listening to us. They don't believe us. And when we do get the help we need, it's met with attitude. So with Rebirth Her, what I wanted to do was be able to help women understand that, hey, if you need the help, I will, one, help you have those questions prepared so that when you are going to these appointments, you're able to advocate for yourself, and or I will go with you to advocate on your behalf. So that's what started Rebirth Her. And from there, I started to work really closely with WIC offices. So I was able to contract and partner with WIC offices and also provide these services within the WIC offices. I was able to work with women for them to find the best version of themselves. So where I kind of pivoted with Rebirth Her is I also realized that as women, just because we're on assistance doesn't mean, one, we have to stay there, right? You know, we can still live our dream. But when you don't have people in your corner who will allow you or who are supporting you, it feels so far away. So on top of just helping women and advocating women in the healthcare industry, I also wanted to just give women the space to say, hey, you can do what you need to do. You can be what you want to be. So I was working with my organization of Rebirth Her. And at this time, I also pivoted from in-person social work to crisis management via tech messaging. So I started with text line. And this is where my journey gets a little bit interesting because this is where my mental health background meets tech. And for me, that was always interesting because I never was one to understand how tech and mental health could work together. Because as a social worker, my thing is like, you're only going to get the best services if I see you face to face, if we're meeting one on one. You know, we can't get that same from like text messaging or calling, things like that. But Crisis Text Line was a startup and it showed me something different. So I was a manager there for about 6 years. And what Crisis Text Line did was provide 24/7 crisis support via text messaging to everyone in the United States. So I was able to really see how we were able to connect mental health with tech and give people who may not have access to this finally access to some type of mental health support. I'm a big component of like, again, I talk about the seeds being planted, right? You plant the seed and it will grow. So if you give someone the opportunity to say, hey, I need a therapist or I'm not okay, you don't know where that conversation can go. And what Crisis Text Line did was allow people who may never even thought about what it looks like to get mental health support, finally get that mental health support. So that was my first transition to tech.
Right. So let me tell you this. So after that, you're close to Shaniqua. You talk to her all the time, but when she's planning something, you might not know, right? So she's at this crisis company, tech company, and then she says, "Oh, I applied for Facebook," and I'm like,
Yeah.
"Really?" And so she said, "I'm on my fourth interview," and I'm like, "You're gonna get this." But she also applied at Google, and so Facebook, for some reason, she didn't make it to the next round.
Mm-hmm.
And so then tell them what happened with Google and what you do now.
Yes. So I was really shooting my shot at these tech companies. Like I applied for Facebook, I applied for Disney, I applied for Sony. And I was just like, something in my spirit was just like, it's time for a change, time for a change. And Facebook, yes, I had got all the way to the fourth round. And, you know, for some reason I didn't get it. And I was bummed at first. And my husband at the time was just like, oh, don't worry about something's going to come your way. And probably like a month later, a Google recruiter contacted me. And they were like, hey, you know, we saw your resume, your profile on LinkedIn, and we want to interview you for a role at Google. And I was just like, this is spam. This is not real. But I ended up talking to the woman because she was just letting me know this was on the YouTube side, basically Alphabet, which is the main company of like Google, YouTube, cloud, things like that. So she was letting me know about this new program that YouTube had coming. And she thought because of my background with crisis management, with social work and with wellness, that I would be a good candidate for a team lead role for their graphic violence division. So I applied, I went through the interviews, and the whole time I'm just thinking, man, I hope I don't have to leave Texas. And like I told you all before, the one place that I would not want to go because of weather is Michigan. And she was like, it's in Michigan. I was like, no, I don't want to do this. And I was like, and I kept the whole interview process. I remember every time I passed the interview, she was like, I was like, do I have to go to Michigan? She was like, yes. Like, do I have to go to Michigan? She was like, yes. And so we got to the last round and she was like, I'm really working on your package. I really want you to take this opportunity. And I told her, like, I don't want to go to Michigan. And she was like, trust me, I really believe this is going to change your life and change your idea of like what you can bring to an organization. So I talked it over with my husband and we did decide we rented our house out because we had just built a house too in Texas. So I was just like, man, we're just getting started here. We shouldn't move. We talked it over though, and we prayed about it. And yeah, it led me back to Michigan, where I was a team lead for YouTube on their graphic violence division. And it was really different for me because again, this is my first time in big tech. It's also my first time dealing with things that are not mental health related. So this is like corporate America, not about your feelings and mental health, but yet you are in charge of making sure that your team well-being is okay due to the content they're watching on a regular basis. So I was with them for the YouTube side for about almost a year. And again, that thing was how can I put it? When God's just like tugging on your heartstrings and like God wants you to do something else, it's time to move, it's time to move. And I applied for the legal team. So I applied for the legal team at Google. And again, I was like, I have no legal background. I'm not going to get this, but we'll see what happens. I applied and I got it. So I ended up transitioning from the YouTube side of Google to Google's legal team, the legal investigation team. And that's when I relocated to California. So I started as a team lead. I am now a senior investigation manager for domestic criminal. And what my team does is basically we are in charge of ensuring that all the search warrants, subpoenas, court orders that are coming through via law enforcement that we're actually processing these. So we make sure that we work closely with law enforcement, FBI, the DOJ, just to make sure that we are helping crimes get solved, but we're also making sure that we're protecting user data. So we want to make sure that anything that we do provide for law enforcement is also compliance to what we do provide for users. We do try to put users first, but we also want to make sure that we are supporting and helping some of some big crimes and cases. So that's what I do. I really enjoy what I do because it does allow me two things. One, I always want to make an impact in this world. And sometimes with big tech, it's like, what impact can you make, right? You're not an engineer. But what I really like about my team is like, we are making sure that law enforcement get what they need timely. We are solving kidnappings. We are making sure that, child pornography is not out there. We are really catching the bad guys. And that makes me feel good that we're doing our part. And then the second part is because of my position with my team, I'm able to kind of bring that mental health side of what I'm passionate about to my team. I'm making sure that they're okay with the work that they're doing. I'm having those conversations in regards to, what their future looks like. So it's the best of both worlds. But I've been doing that. I'm going on my 5th year. Yes.
Wow, that's awesome. And I can attest that department really does what it's supposed to do, because we had a broadcast on one night, and someone came from YouTube, and they were saying things like, they rape little babies and they do this and that, and I reported it to her, not knowing that she could really do something about it through her department, and they got it done. They shut him down. I don't know what else happened after that, but he didn't bother us anymore. But he would come on. He had a clown face, and he would act like he was friendly to little kids.
Yeah.
But he was really somebody that could really take advantage of your kids. So, kudos to Shaniqua for that.
Yes,
But
and I always tell people, just want to put this out here, Ms. Laura, like I always tell people, really watch your kids online. I think that's the one thing that has really shifted for me is, there are so many bad characters out there in the world, and even things that seem innocent, just double check your kids, make sure you know what they're watching. You're never doing too much. So that's something that I've learned with with doing that type of work. Just watch the babies.
Wow. And so the final thing that is your biggest project in your life is your kids, your mom. You have an older son that is on his own, but you also have two younger kids, a daughter and a son. So tell us a little bit about them. And you have a daughter that's just as adventurous as you are. So
Yes, yes. I have three kids. I'll start with my oldest. He'll be 21 this month. We're actually leaving Wednesday to go to Michigan. That's where he is. And I would say that's my, I know we try to say, well, your kids aren't your best friend, but I can say this now that he's 21, right? Because we literally grew up together. You know, he's seen me at my worst, my best. He's seen us through all the trials and tribulations from, you know, living in housing to building a home. Like he's seen it all. And I've learned the most from him because one of the things that he has taught me is how to be a mom. You know, when growing up with not so much of a mother figure in my life, I didn't know. I didn't have a blueprint at all. I know we always say like, oh, there's no blueprint to parenting. I didn't even have a manual to even start with. So a lot of my trial and error with John, my oldest, is because of like we grew up together. And with him, he wanted to go to school to be a social worker. So that also transitioned him back to Michigan to take classes. And he works just as much as me. And I always tell like, I know I worked a lot, son, but you don't have to. Like it's just you. But ingrained in him, like, you know, that hardworking spirit between me and his dad of teaching him just how to, you know, be with women, how to be your own self. My son is super confident and I love that about him. So that's my oldest. Then I have my daughter who is 13 and yes, she is very adventurous. The one thing about my youngest, my daughter's who's 13 and my son who's 6 is I was in a better position to allow them to figure out who they were. I think because I had my son so young, I did not have the opportunity to figure out who I was. So I was always operating on survival mode. Like I knew I had to get a good job to take care of kids. I knew I had to do this. I knew I was supposed to do this. So I was never able to really tap into the artistic side of myself. But with my daughter, she's a competitive dancer. So she dances in jazz, ballet, lyrical, and musical theater. And she does competitions across Texas. With her, I've always honed into her, like, you can do and be whatever you want. And she literally takes that. So she's been dancing since she was 3. And she also modeled when she was younger. So she's really strong-minded and, hey, I like this. This is what I want to do. This is what I'm going to be. She plays the cello. So she's really artistic. I think that's because her dad is artistic too. So like, it's just, she has the space to be that person. So it's been amazing just watching her grow into herself. She's not really easy to like peer pressure or just like following the crowd. Like she really dances to the beat of her own drum. And I love that about her. It's one of those things of like seeing things that I wish I could have done with myself, but seeing it happen with my kids, it has been really amazing. And then as my 6-year-old, reason I had to go off camera for a little bit, he is his own person. And he's learning that, you know, he has a voice. And that's one thing that I do with my kids. I don't stop the voice. You know, I don't just, you know, stay in a child's place or, you know, you are to be seen and not heard. You know, we have conversations. And again, I give this credit to my oldest son. He allowed me to figure out what that looks like. And I just got better over time. So my youngest, who is 6, he just became a dragon in karate. So he does karate.
Hey,
Yeah, he plays piano now. His dad is a
wow.
as well. So like we're taking all my kids are artistic and I'm just like, I'm just here. So he's learning those skills and it's just been amazing watching kids be kids because that's one space I felt like I've never been able to do. So it's been really beautiful being a parent.
Wow. So this is the incomparable high tech social worker, mental health advocate, mother that, you know, has allowed her kids to just be who they are and grow into who they would like to be. And they're doing just that. I am a witness of that. And so this has been a great conversation. But before we go, I don't know, there's a young lady on there. I don't know if she's still watching. Her name is Tiela Maz. but she wants to connect with you. So if people would like to connect with you, how can they do that?
Yeah, so there are a couple ways that you could connect with me. The best way is on Facebook, and you can just find me at Shaniqua Staples. So literally my first name, Shaniqua, last name Staples, Staples. Send me a message, send me a friend request, and we can definitely connect if you're looking for resources or if you just want to chat more. And then also you can find me on Instagram at Staples87. So again, my username on Instagram is Staples87 or LinkedIn. You can also find me at Shaniqua Staples. So literally, if you put in my name, first and last name, you'll be able to find me. I'm more than happy to connect more in regards to resources. Or if you're looking to transition your life, again, we're never too old to do that. If you want to learn more about how to transition into tech, if you want to know more about social work and crisis management, or if you just want to have a talk about life, because again, we can't do this alone. And sometimes we just don't have that community. But if you're looking to find that community, I'm more than happy to talk.
Wow. And so you've been tuned into TAN TV, the African American Network, where we have a local feel with the global reach, and we're celebrating women. Yes, Tyrone Washington is celebrating women all month long.
Yes.
And he asked about the next episode. It's going to be 4:30 Central Standard Time tomorrow. But before we go, and I forgot what the before we go was going to be. Oh, yes. Shaniqua and a couple of her tribe members, sisters, have a show that airs at 8 p.m. on Monday evenings, which the sixth episode will be airing tonight.
Yes.
And so it's called Minus the Blueprint. Shaniqua told me about this project maybe early last year. She said, "We're going to do this. We're going to do this." But I told you she's a planner and an organizer, and she has to have all her ducks in a row first before she starts. But this is the sixth episode that's going to be coming out tonight at 8 p.m. and every Monday at 8 p.m. And someone corrected me, and they said it's Central Daylight Time, so it's CDT
Yes.
instead of CST. But most people know Central whatever it is, Central Standard Time. Yes.
Yeah,
So
no, definitely check us out with Minus the Blueprint. We're right here on TAN TV, so you can definitely check us out, local or global. And if you want to learn more about me or the other ladies who are on the show, we talk about real life topics. Like I said before, we're just three women who didn't have a blueprint in so many different areas of our life, but we're figuring it out. So please check us out. You may laugh with us. You may really start thinking about your own life, but at the end of the day, we really just want to support others in their growth.
wow, and this is really free counseling, so you might want to tune in. Wow. I have an opportunity to record and film sometimes, and it's free counseling for me, and so check us out. So you've been tuned again into TAN TV, the African American Network, where we have a local feel with the global reach, and it's Women's History Month, and we'll be celebrating all month long. And thank you, Shaniqua, for taking time out of your super busy schedule to come on and tell us a little bit about your journey.
No, thank you so much, Miss Laura, for having me and allowing me to jump into your DM almost 6 years ago, and I haven't let you go since, and you're not going to get rid of me. So I really appreciate everything that you do for the community, but also just allowing this platform for women. You are Women's History Month. So again, thank you so much for allowing me on today.
All right, and thank you. Have a good evening.
You
Ciao.
too.